All right, we are live. My name is Christian Ludwig. This is Tarik with Octaspace. Tarik, is that the correct pronunciation?
Yeah, that's fine. That's Tarik. Yes, that's correct.
Oh,
That's great.
perfect. So tell us a bit about yourself and the project.
Thanks for that, Chris. So obviously, I'm Tarik. I'm actually the chief product officer at Octaspace, but also I guess project manager as well. I have a background. I worked in a lot of corporations, mainly historically in the IT sector, but kind of branching in the IT space, but in different sectors. So from healthcare to even gambling. So, for example, William Hill, I worked as a product manager at Virgin Pulse. I've worked long time ago. I even started my career as a developer, actually in British Telecom in the United Kingdom, because I finished the university in the UK. So I've had quite an interesting and diverse career, and and at one point in time, I guess my path took me into the crypto space. I historically I dabbled a little bit before. I've known about crypto for many years, and I even dabbled in mining a long time ago. But blockchain always fascinated me. The I guess the avenues it opens up and the future really, I believe honestly, the decentralization and blockchain is genuinely the future of where we need to go, where we're going. I think a lot of I don't want to get over philosophical here, but I think based on how we're seeing that the world is going, and with more and more control over things, and how things are regulated by companies and so many controls imposed, I think people are looking for that freedom, right, of decentralization that it offers. But it's also the ability of seeing how I the best way I could put it, and I know it's not strictly stuck with Octaspace, but the best way I can put it is, if you look back to the 60s, where innovation was fueled, right? We're looking at the space age, right? And even the computing age. There were always catalysts that drove that innovation. And I feel that, we kind of gated ourselves or closed ourselves off, fenced ourselves off over time. And yes, while innovation is progressing, there are always certainly barriers and more control, et cetera, et cetera. And I think blockchain and decentralization and projects launched on blockchain are the new kind of avenue for that innovation.
I think
Which I
that's
guess
especially,
sorry, go on, Chris.
yeah, I think that's especially true now with the likes of OpenAI and Amazon, a bunch of
Yeah,
computing power being concentrated in these massive farms under these large companies, and especially AI being developed by just a few
right.
large firms. I think AI and DePIN is right there at the cusp of being a a perfect solution and an updated solution for a decentralized computing as well as AI, specifically
Well,
rendering.
yeah, so AI is an interesting one, and I actually think why blockchain and decentralized projects are more suited to developing AI long term. So there's a fine line. I think there's a lot of concern, especially if you're looking at OpenAI, you're looking at Microsoft, Google. They're all developing their own models. Obviously, there are limits in what they will let their model do. So there's a fine line where we will look at ethics. I don't agree with imposing limits. There's obviously certain things we all think are morally wrong.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I think, and there will always be bad actors. We have
Yes.
to look past this, right? There are even commercial tools that potentially could be used maliciously. I don't think we should, start limiting that aspect. And I think one of the reasons, having these barriers is also a stumbling block to innovation. If I'm honest with you, right? Models are trained on data sets, on various data sets, what you give it. But telling it, feeding it certain ones and not telling it that this other side of everything else exists. You know, we were talking,
Hmm.
you know, let's even go down curse words. Just keep that simple, right? We know that OpenAI knows that they exist, but it won't use them. It won't, you know. And I know Grok, they've tried to play with that a little bit, but there's always, again, a limit, right? And
Yeah.
again, please don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm not advocating for certainly malicious things to be done. They will always exist. But if you're developing, you know, intelligence, then surely that intelligence should be aware of all the aspects that exist, right? And give it a mix of data sets so it can better make judgments, as well as provide, I guess, more human-like interactions.
So that's the real open AI, is not
I
castrating the
Yeah,
data
this
set.
is just my opinion, and I think, you know, why I think blockchain and decentralization is more suited to kind of fuel that innovation more. As I said, we
Absolutely is.
can't just focus on what are the moral issues that, you know, we have to
Hmm.
tell you can't have or not give it certain data, because data is never complete. Then you're not giving it a complete picture, and there's always, I don't know if you've seen, I think we're derailing this conversation a little bit, but I'll try and wrap it up. I'm sure you've seen some of the, I think, controversies with some of the digital art, right? They were, that was getting generated, and they were, you know, trying to give it or tell it to be more diverse. They were training it to be more diverse racially, which then ultimately kind of, at certain aspects, culturally skewed, right? Skewed the image. So you know, and I think you might have seen, right? There's an Afro-American now, controversy Afro-American, I think, samurai for Assassin's Creed. I mean, I'm not going to get into this issue. I'm not trying to, you know, I don't have an issue.
Well, it's
But
all
the point
over. I
being
mean,
is, if you're leaning the data towards one end of the spectrum, you're not giving that complete
exactly.
freedom to, and that's the issue,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. And
This
we've
is the
seen that
point.
with Google's AI being super left leaning. It's everywhere, and
Right,
blockchain's a great solution for that. So
exactly.
Octaspace so far has released 3 AI models.
Yeah,
One is
yeah.
particularly interesting to me on Hugging Face. Can you speak more about that?
Well, so I'll provide a little bit more context. So I'm not the AI guy,
Right.
but what we do have is we work with researchers to train, and what we've done is given them complete freedom on our platform to train AI models. Actually, I should take a step back. I think we skipped the kind of point on just giving a little overview of Octaspace. And Octaspace is a distributed computing project, right? And what just a very quick overview. I won't go into too much detail, but basically we have a marketplace where people can provide nodes, computing nodes, and effectively it's kind of like a peer-to-peer. Yeah, right? They can set up and say, okay, I have some hardware. I'm going to set up the pricing for it based on what I deem it's worth to rent. So imagine a peer-to-peer car rental place, right? I go,
Hmm.
you know, and this guy says, you know, my car is worth this much per day, right? I'll go and rent your car, right? I like
Yep.
your car. I like the specs of it. I'll get it to you. But imagine in this way, we enable a bunch of them. So you could rent a fleet, right? All at once. So you could rent one. And it's the same, right? Concept is computers. You can rent as many as little as you want based on your budget requirements and based on your hardware needs. But on top of that, we build services. So we have a combination of obviously certain ready to launch open source services, but and this is where we differentiate with other platforms, right? There are, you know, we're not the only ones in the space, in even in the traditional market in terms of computing or distributed computing, but we are unique because we also focus on building our own bespoke services. So
Hmm.
what that means is, so I know we'll touch upon it probably later, but you know, we've built our own rendering platform. But what we also identified is, look, we have, in a way, you know, even with this, all these hardware nodes provided by everyone else, we have a decentralized infrastructure. So why not leverage it to provide a VPN, for example, which is what we've done.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
all this is, you know, I think the possibilities are endless, and that's something we really take on board in our approach. And why I said, we've started building our own bespoke services, because look, and I don't know if you've watched any of my previous interviews, but I've always said my approach has always been, and this is going back to my product manager mentality as well, is I want the average Joe to use it. If a service is taking more than 1 to 2 clicks to get working, or to launch something, if it's too complicated, people aren't going to use it. And that's always been my mantra is, is it easy for the average Joe to use? If it's not, you've done it wrong, right? And that's kind of something about Octaspace. I think it's our ethos of how we work. And I won't go into, but we have an ethics codex, and we have how we approach things, I think. And I'll talk about it probably later, how we approach in general, even in the crypto market. But now circling back to your question about AI models. So one of the features on our platform is the ability to train AI models, right? And a lot of that can be done through TensorFlow, Jupyter Lab, PyTorch, and all those tools are ready to go. And what we've seen is people are using it. However, we didn't see that we cracked that market segment. And I'll talk about market segments a lot more probably during this discussion. But if we go just on briefly, we have individual service sections that the way we see it. So, we're targeting segments of the market where we talk about artists, and we talk about VPN users, we talk about AI artists, we talk about compute users, and so on. And now, we've hit certain segments very successfully. And the AI segment, I can see a lot more opportunity to grow. And so what we've done is we reached out to some AI researchers and said, look, would you like to work with us? And put our platform through its paces. Basically, is it fit for purpose? I'm not an AI trainer.
Yeah.
Our devs are AI trainers. They know
and
how
for
to
the audience.
Say again?
Yeah. For the audience, 2 of the models that are currently built under construction, one is an automatic speech recognition, dealing with South African countries, which is fascinating. And then my favorite is there's one that summarizes information from documents efficiently.
Yeah. Those are actually already on Hugging Face, so you can go there and download them. They're free. We've made them free to download. So then, again, I think it's OpenGL. I'm not sure which, but basically, what we've done is we've given the AI researchers complete freedom to train whatever they want. And I think this goes back to the ethos that we discussed at the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah.
There is complete freedom. There's there's no limitation of data sets. It's that going back to complete decentralization and free AI. I think that's a good term. Free AI.
Yes.
It's free from limits. But the idea, the whole point is that it's growing credibility. Because the more AI models we release, it will also give us credibility in the AI research sector, because the AI researchers are also going to be publishing papers and including our name in that. And so there's a lot of scientific journals who will use the term Octos. And I think that speaks volumes, right? Is you need to hit that academic sector. And the more you do, the best way to do it is by, proof of the pudding, if you've heard that term before, but is someone actually saying this has been trained on this has been trained on this, using this data sets, inference, and so on. Again, as I said, I'm not an AI guy in terms of I can't train myself. I tried dabbling. It takes a little bit. It's a little bit of a learning curve. But I think this is our approach, and I think it's going to be a successful one because it is giving us slow recognition. Again, I see this as an opportunity for growth.
Sure.
But one other aspect in terms of AI is that, and I'll touch upon it probably later, of what path we're looking to take, but we're also focusing on building some of our own AI services. So what we're talking about is, you obviously know a lot about AI art and chat and so on. And I think we want to launch some of our own as well in that segment. That's actually on the roadmap for this year in our strategic roadmap planning, and we'll be looking at some of the options. I think it considers some of the options and models, but potentially people loading their own models. I think as much freedom as possible, but make it as easy as possible. I think that
is there potential for AI to enhance the rendering process,
yes,
or give suggestions on
now
the
this
Octa
is a
platform?
very, Chris, this is a very touchy subject, and I'll explain why. Artists, real artists, are very touchy on the subject of AI, and they don't support AI art. Absolutely not.
Because it bends the curve of what is the creator's art versus
the
computer's art.
In a way, we've had to assure artists that we keep that right now as two separate services and they don't touch each other. Now, going back to your question, that doesn't mean we haven't considered some AI inclusion into the rendering aspect. What we are going to probably do, and we are already have started exploring, is using upscaling, AI upscaling. So meaning that you can submit a render in a much smaller format, which means speeding it up, but using AI scaling to make it, more higher resolution. So about 4K. So you can submit something in a much lower, it'll render even faster, but it will still not losing quality. But I think that has to be an opt-in option, meaning that the artist has to choose intentionally to agree.
Certainly.
And I think we have to give that assurance. One thing that artists are concerned about is that, and it's a valid criticism, is their art being used to train AI models? And I will say unequivocally not. We have an ethics code. We would not do. But that is the concern that many artists do have is, with a platform such as ours, is, you guys offer AI. How safe is my artwork that you're not going to consume that, right, and use it to train AI art, right? So this is why I mentioned to you, it's always a touchy subject, and it's something that I always intentionally clarify that right now we keep them separate. We don't, the AI services are completely separate from the rendering platform, and they're still connected to all the same platform, but not,
yes,
we launched the rendering service intentionally, and there's no AI involvement in that. We are also exploring other options in terms of upscaling that may not need AI. So things like that. So we want to offer two options. And I'll give the choice to artists. I think that's the best avenue to kind of best of both worlds. So yes, in answer to your question, yes, there is opportunity for AI in rendering, and we're looking into that.
Awesome. The follow-up question to that, for those currently developing models on Happy Face, is the main value add proposition for them to build on Octaspace? Does it have to do with the economical and fast rendering they can do on the rendering platform for their data sets, for any images, for video outputs? Is that why anyone would build on Octaspace?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the biggest selling factors is the price. It really is very, very cheap.
Fast.
Rendering models and training models. Training models takes a long time. There is a lot of data sets, and obviously there's a lot of inference, and they have to keep running that inference. It's intensive, and I think costs. It can be very costly doing it, on some of the more commercial platforms, I think. And I think the fact that we offer this democratized computing is probably the best term.
That's an advantage for them as well.
Yeah, I think it's a choice, right? They have a choice. They can look and they can limit or choose to limit how long they want to train, or I think it's very cost effective. There are many, as I mentioned, DeepIn is a growing space. I don't know if you, and I was, I often do a lot of, I don't want to sidetrack the point, but there is something that, I wanted to mention is I looked at some, let's call it competitors. But
Yes.
it's always important to get a, lay of the land, understand whether the projects are building, what are they doing, how are you differing? And I have a tendency to even try out that platform. Those that actually have a platform. Unfortunately, many launch that are just scams. They claim to something, but
or potential vaporware.
90% of vaporware. Those that are not as complex as they seem. But
what I like to tell people is
what
I like to tell people is 98% of crypto is a scam or an organizational corporation, but the 2% that's legit could change the world.
Right. Yeah. Well, so one I was looking at yesterday is the project is based on ETH, and they have a marketplace, and I wanted to try it out. And so to rent something on their marketplace, you have to deposit ETH. First of all, I think I kind of deposited like $5 worth, but I ended up paying $20 worth of gas for it. So my initial, I deposited $5 and I ended up paying, whatever, $25, $30 overall.
Right.
Which, so for $5, what did I get? I actually spent 30 or whatever it was. Yeah. So let's say 25 for gas, $5. And then, so suddenly I'm already out of pocket. How is that incentivized? How is that even worthwhile doing for someone to rent that? Even if you match prices 2 hours, you're going to still pay a lot more out of pocket. I think it doesn't make sense. For us, it is native Octa, but the costs are so minimal. It really is Octa. This is one of the reasons we often get asked, why do you have your own blockchain? This is exactly why we have our own blockchain.
Yes.
We can control the consensus. We can ensure it's a fair launch project, which it is. And how coins are distributed, how I think that's the key here, is people don't understand, why would we launch on another blockchain? We don't have that control in respect of, well, what if they change consensus, their own? What if they, we can't ensure low costs, and that's the other issue. So a slight sidetracking here of the conversation, but I think it's important to have that context. Yeah.
Yes.
In why we do things the way we did, and so going back to that, yes, the costs are really infinitesimal, but they are still profitable for users, for the node providers.
Correct.
And I think that's important to note. Many node providers are seeing, I think they're seeing great earnings. No one's complained so far, so I think that's great. And obviously, I encourage anyone who, especially with GPUs, but we actually support. I think it's important to note as well, is because of what we've done, you don't have to just have a GPU. You can actually have a node just as a CPU node. You can provide a VPN service if you want to. You can even run a Raspberry Pi on our as a node and just use it as a VPN exit node. So our node software is compatible, and our marketplace is compatible with all these devices. We also support AMD and Intel GPUs. So I think that's important to note. Again, many are so focused on NVIDIA only, but the point is our software and marketplace support a wide variety of hardware, and different services can be run on the different types of hardware. So I think it's something that also differentiates us from many out there.
Good. So it's no hidden secret that Octaspace's Octarender platform is kind of the cream of the crop for the platform. It's broken the mold on how fast and scalable rendering can be. Yep. Many artists have documented praising the platform. I see it all the time on Octa's Twitter. The economical costs, the ease of use, quote unquote, insane speeds compared to anything else they've used, centralized or decentralized. Recently, there have been updates in which the platform will suggest an artist how to more efficiently complete a render. What's next for the platform? Or is that this point is it kind of chasing perfection, being as
Oh,
quick and economical as it is?
it's a great question. And I've mulled this one, over. I think, I keep getting asked where's the direction. And honestly, to a certain degree, we've given a lot of freedom to the developers to decide what route they want to take. I think it's important to know as well is that our developers are actually extremely experienced, and some of them are artists too. And
Cool.
some of them have also worked on Blender. But I'll keep that. But it's an interesting fact. But yeah, one of them
Hmm.
has been a technical director in the art space, I think, for about 17 years, or if not 20 years, something along that. He sent it to me before. I always forget the exact number, but and they're a great bunch. And they understand what artists want. I think that's key. But
Hmm.
what we did was, I don't know if you saw, but when we originally kind of put Octarender out there, we reached out to a bunch of artists and said, "Hey, do you want to test it out?" And why? Because we want them to be our beta testers. We want them to break it, right? And that's because, and don't this shouldn't sound across wrong. Artists will understand what I say next, but artists often do things that artists shouldn't do. Right? And like in any tool, there are ways of doing things the tool expects you to do, but there are
Hmm.
ways of people that do things that receive, achieve the same outcome, but they kind of do it the wrong way around. And I think it's important. Why it's important that we opened up originally Octarender to beta testing is specifically because of those scenarios, understanding those potential scenarios and getting Octarender to break, right? My key focus was make it easy to use, make it cost effective, and make it robust, right?
Hmm.
Those are three primary factors that were important. I think we can let's dive into Octarender, because it's one of the proudest services I think I am most proud of anyway on Octaspace. Octarender is because it's a fascinating service. What they've built is because, so first of all, I might talk a little bit too much. Oh, that's great. But yeah, you can see some of those renders. I think that one's actually cancelled. That I think that's. But yeah, you can click on some of them and actually have a look at that Warlock one actually. And if you go back into my projects and click on Warlock, yeah, so that one's great. You can see the quality on that one, absolutely amazing, right? Look at those reflections. But and something great, right? That I've not seen anywhere. If you click on the top right hand corner there where it says composite, yeah, you can now see these are all different render layers. So what we've actually, as a perfect example of a feature that's not available anywhere else, is that we do multi-layer rendering, or we facilitate that, where artists can render multiple renders at once in the same render, so individual layers. So we talk about composites, we talk about diffusion, and so on. And so I think that's great. You can click on some of those and you can see what they are. Some of them may display, some of them may not. So
And
feel
for the audience, this is a fully functioning rendering platform
right.
that's being
Yes.
used by hundreds of people, some developing animation for the likes of Bungie,
Yeah. This is
Coca-Cola.
actually for Bungie. This is actually for, I believe, for Destiny 2.
I'm a big Halo
It's
3 fan. I'm a big Halo player, so
yeah.
that stuck out to me.
Yeah, they do a lot. The VFX studio, I think it's great that they're doing this. So these are all
So
different
why are they rendering on Octaspace?
Well, this
These
is the thing,
big
is
artists.
right, precisely because of the three factors I mentioned. First of all, it's
Yes.
easy to use. So the best way that they submit to render is directly from Blender, for example. We've made our own add-on, so there's no need to I don't know if you've experienced any other rendering service, but often a lot of them are headless. What that means is you have to pack the files, zip it up, upload it through a web page, and so on and so on. And you're not having to do that here. You're doing it directly from Blender, as an example. Actually, just yesterday, an artist reached out to me and said, this feels like I'm doing this directly on my PC. It doesn't feel like I'm rendering on a remote render farm. anywhere. It feels like I'm rendering on my PC. It's still part of what I'm doing and the activity. This transition is so seamless. And I think that's important. It's also important that people can scale. People can view, I could say, okay, I want to add this many GPUs and I want to set the budget. So if we go to add nodes, for example, you can see that actually. People can set how many GPUs they want, how much storage, and what the max budget is. Don't do that right now, though. Otherwise,
no, I got you.
It'll trigger on an account, but and start charging. But yeah, so they can increase the number of GPUs based on what they want. Now,
it's important to note that all users pay in the native token, in the native coin,
absolutely.
Octa, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely correct. So Octa is the native coin, and it's used for payment of all services on our platform. But yeah, this is this is a specifically unique feature as well, where we're not only giving them the option to set budget and scale, but you can actually do this real time. So let's say, for the sake of argument, you choose to have 5 GPUs and you set, let's say 2 octa per hour. Well, let's say you're in the middle of that render. I'm going to increase that. You can actually choose to increase this number of GPUs and increase the budget in real time, and will automatically scale up. And you can keep doing that, or you can then choose, hey, I want to reduce my budget or reduce the number of GPUs. You can scale down. And I think that's also something extremely unique that's done. But there are other unique aspects that Octa does, or Octarender does, that many don't and have not achieved. One of the issues that you often have, so our nodes are often multi-GPU nodes. So what that often means is, a node provider will provide a node with 1 to 2 to 5 GPUs, right? And often many rendering platforms are not able to scale that well when there's multiple nodes with multiple GPUs. What often ends up happening is each node, all the GPUs end up working on the same task. So the tasks still get distributed to the individual nodes, but all of the GPUs at once are working on the same task. That's not what we've done. What we've done is enabled it to work on every single, it identifies how many GPUs are on each node, and it will render each GPU will work on individual tasks.
Is that the frame by frame aspect?
Absolutely. It'll distribute all the frames out there and say, okay, I don't look at how many nodes you've rented. I look at how many GPUs are out there, and that's how many tasks are going to be worked on, and distribute the tasks that way. And it's a very, very smart system, especially considering that you are effectively, look at the perspective, is you are effectively distributing a bunch of individual frames across GPUs located all over the world. Decentralized completely,
frame by frame.
That's
the crazy part to me,
right?
I think that's frame by frame distributed rendering, frame by frame distributed rendering.
Right, exactly. But it's doing them all at once. It's saying, yeah, hey, I've scaled up to 20 GPUs. Oh, I have 200 frames, but I've got I've identified I've got 20 GPUs. Okay, I'm going to take all these frames, the first 20, and just going to send them across all these GPUs, and then they come back, and just all this data exchange. Can you imagine the vast data exchange that's happening here? And this is all getting rendered, and people then can say, okay, yeah, I'm downloading all these frames. And there are improvements that are being done right now. So right now, downloading these frames are also done through Blender. You can through the add-on. But we're actually now implementing a new feature, and this is an exclusive, I guess, of being able to download in real time as each frame is get done. So at the moment, often artists download everything once the render is complete. Right?
And it'll say processing, and then you don't get it till the end.
It'll say running, and as each frame is getting rendered, immediately gets downloaded to your machine in real time. And I think that's important because it also, as I said, everything that we do is about ease of use and making the streamlining that process. I don't want an artist to be sat there, waiting for the download at the end of the day. Especially you look at ones where you've got 2,000 frames, right? 2,000
Mm-hmm.
frames can take quite a long time or more, especially if they're, imagine, 4K files. Then you're looking at, you're looking at files that are, some of them 10 megabytes each or even larger. And if you, for each individual frame, we'll talk about, you can get up to 20 or 100. And that can take a long time to say. So these ones, for example.
So this one's 1600.
Because it's not just, this is not 1682 frames. If you go to up at the composite, it's actually 1600 multiplied by however many composites there are. So for each one of those, it's 1682 frames.
With multiple layers, all done for $6.
Yeah, everything downloads all at once, right? And but it's incredible. But go, I think this is some of the stuff that we've built. I think it really is revolutionary. But it's, I also didn't mention, we also support rendering. Our rendering works with AMD cards, not just NVIDIA. It works with Intel cards.
It's expanding the decentralization even.
Right. It works with CPUs as well. CPUs, so you can render on CPU or GPUs. We're expanding. I can probably provide you some screenshots later, but we've got some updates to the node section. You can monitor the number of nodes. I think you showed it at the beginning of how many nodes or GPUs you've rented and what the actual resource utilization is on each one of those. But we're also going to add an advanced section now on the ability to choose GPUs, because at the moment, when you choose the number of GPUs and budget, you're letting our algorithm allocate nodes based on your budget. But we're going to enable an advanced section where people will actually be able to choose individual which nodes they like, if they want to manually. So we'll give that option for those who want it. So, I mean, I'm trying to think, but there's a bunch of features that we've done. And
we'll cap it there. I know you could go on for an hour.
I could go on. Right now there's also we've got a great testing team, and they are trying to break Octarender even more.
Good.
So again, it's all about that robustness. But I think it's one of the key aspects is it has to be stable and robust. It has to be idiot-proof, for lack of a better term.
So we'll talk about robustness. Let's talk about speed and performance versus other options. So Octarender can perform function at 1700 frames per second. So if you compare this to, maybe a leading retail option, AWS Deadline, this is actually, and I'm quoting this correctly, 8,500 times the speed for a render. Are there any centralized rendering solutions that can compare to the platform speed, or is it simply the fastest rendering solution for retail users? Or
tasks per
on
second,
par?
Yeah, so tasks per second, I have to clarify what that specifically alludes to. Tasks per second is how quickly the data can be transmitted between the nodes. There's obviously always internet and so on, but it's not just that, it's how quickly the software, or let's call it, the rendering platform, which is the software is distributed to each node, how it works, can trigger or render small multiple, let's say multi-layer renders, for example. So all those you saw at once. In a typical scenario, right, you would have data goes out and says, I want to render a frame. It takes 2 seconds, and then it starts doing that job. Ours does 17,000 in a second. And I think that's important. So AWS or Amazon does it once. It takes 2 seconds to respond. Ours does 17,000 1 second. So what that means is, so for example, you showed that multi-render layers. It can do all those at once. And that's why I said it renders them all in the same frame without a rendering time cost. On ThinkBox, on AWS ThinkBox, you would have to render each one of those layers individually, and you would have to multiply it by time. You imagine not only the time, but also the costs.
And that's the proprietary ingenuity behind Octaspace's platform. That's the breakthrough.
Yeah. And one, our guys, our developers have been tinkering with the idea. They do have. They said they have a working beat. I haven't pushed them, but I leave them to be innovative. And they said they're going to see if they can push it to 100,000. I said there's no need properly, but
I like the idea.
Devs will be devs. They let them do what they want.
Yeah.
Often, I like giving them some of that freedom.
So from 17,000 to 100,000 is what we're talking.
It's ridiculous. No one's gonna need it that much, but
yeah.
But there is something, and I think it's important to note that the rendering platform, the actual framework behind it, is also a foundation of something we want to get into later, of developing or expanding into, and that's the storage area, using the same architecture used for file storage and distributed file storage. But also, we want to expand our ability to train AI by using that framework, so that we can do better and quicker inference.
Quicker data sets, inference, right.
Right, exactly. Use that ability to process that many tasks per second to train AI models for faster inference. So that's something that we want to do. Again, I'm not probably not spoken. I've not had an opportunity to tell anyone about this, so I think that's important. So it's a great question, and it's a good intro point into that.
Good. So how does the Octaspace rendering solution differ from RNDR, and do they support Blender in app, for example?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I can certainly get into that. So obviously, many of you, I've spoken to it before, and if anyone's watched my interviews, I have a certain opinion of obviously RNDR. I think, don't get me wrong, they have built a platform, right? They have a rendering platform, but they are strictly stuck with their proprietary rendering engine, which I don't know. I think many obviously in the space may not understand the concepts of rendering engine, but effectively it's it's often gives the different way of how it renders light, shading, and so on. So you could render in one engine and it will look different from rendering in another engine. The lighting may hit different, shadows may look a little bit different. So there's obviously those and their preferences. There are many preferences, and there are many rendering engines out there in the world. There are open source ones and there are commercial ones. RNDR use a commercial one, or more specifically, they use an Octa one, or called Octane. And their rendering platform specifically only works with Octane, and it requires users, if a user wants to use their rendering platform, they have to purchase a license from Octa for that Octane engine. They have to pay by card to the, it's a commercial, business.
Not even using the token. You pay
no,
by card.
Nothing. No.
You get a license.
It's a subscription-based service. So it's a license, and you have to pay, I think, annually. So you're paying it to Octa, which is a corporation. So you're giving it MasterCard, Visa, whatever standard fiat. They're storing your information. They're registering you, specifically your license details. An RNDR, to use the rendering platform, they enforce you getting that license. You can't log into the platform. You log into the platform, it says, do you have a subscription? If you don't, you can't use this. And so you have to go back to Octa and you get that subscription. Obviously, we're not fans of that. It kind of goes against the whole point of ethos of decentralization.
Yes. So in comparison with Octaspace platform, no data is collected, no user information. You pay in the native coin,
right,
and you use the platform. Simple, right, fast, effective.
Yeah, exactly. Simple as that.
Decentralized.
Well, it's decentralized, and why do we need to know your personal information?
This is what crypto is supposed to be. This is the real ethos of this space.
I have no I mean, okay, I could argue I could have value from your information because I could see what sort of demographics are using our platform and so on. Some of that insight would be great from a product improvement aspect and marketing aspect. But on the other hand, it kind of breaks the whole idea of what decentralization and, as you said, crypto is all about, is that giving that freedom and anonymity and And I think, this kind of
Eh,
harks back to that. But in
mhm.
terms of the other differences, RNDR is an extremely clunky platform. I've tested it out. It's and I've also tested out many mainstream ones. I think one of the, I've even said it is the way we built ours. I said this is how we don't want to do it, basically, is and but it's not. Look, that platform works, and it's. I'm not here to please don't take this the wrong way
We're
of
talking about the
discredit
differences.
it or
Yeah.
say bad things about RNDR. On the contrary, please don't get me wrong. They have a great
Mhm.
platform, and the Octane engine is absolutely great. I think, and it is used by many artists. The Octane engine, not necessarily
Mhm.
RNDR themselves, but the Octane engine is.
And the commercial
Um,
space, yeah.
Right, exactly. But what I can say is that RNDR, and this is an issue with many solutions in crypto, it's built by engineers. It's not built by. There's no direction from product managers, from users. It's very much built from a technical mindset, and people don't want to use that. I think that's one of the many failures in crypto, and one of the. I mean, I could go into the labyrinth of why we fail in adoption often. I've made my opinion clear on this many times, and I'm very opinionated on the subject in general. But I think one of the other issues is usability. How many platforms are actually usable? Some of them are very convoluted to use, complicated. As I said to you earlier on, I've done my research and sat down and started investigating, okay, who's the competition? How have they done this? And, why do I think, well, why we're better? We take a user-centric approach of how will the user use it? Will he understand what you're giving him? If
Yeah.
he has to figure it out, you've done it wrong.
Right. Let's talk about the differentiation between RNDR and Octa
Yeah.
with Blender support.
Yeah. Well,
Because
so
that's the majority of these artists are
it is.
creating
So
these in Blender.
So let me first preface by why do we go for Blender first? That doesn't mean we're not going to expand to more tools. But obviously, Blender is open source. Blender is one of
And
the most used rendering software, or 3D artists mostly use in the world.
mhm,
That and Unreal Engine. Those are the kind of top two. Many
mhm,
others are very costly, and so you do have professional VFX studios using Blender, but
sure.
what you can also do is you can actually export models from other tools and import into Blender. So Blender is a gateway in general. I think to many, both early starters and professionals. But it's also open source, and we can also support multiple render engines, which so I think it's a great gateway. And so right now, the way Blender or Render works with Blender, they have their
Mhm,
own version of Blender they've made
mhm,
to be able to work with Octane Render. But RNDR have never solved the issue that I mentioned to you before of being able to have multi GPUs render multi frames.
frame by frame.
Even right now, their platform, even if you have 5 GPUs, they're still rendering one frame all at once, 5 GPUs on one node.
Mhm,
So they've never solved that, something that we have solved. And many rendering platforms have struggled solving this. Why is that? Because Blender on its own is notoriously bad at optimizing or using GPUs effectively. All right.
mhm.
But Blender's not the only one. Many tools fail to use GPUs effectively. And so I think that's one of the kind of proudest aspects that, or something that we're really proud of, is that we've solved that issue. That
I've seen,
yeah,
yeah, I've seen a lot of users praise the ability to render out of Blender on
yeah,
Octaspace.
right,
Can you go into
exactly.
that? Like that's what they're saying the
Oh,
competitive
absolutely.
advantage is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the way RNDR works, here's an example. So it works only with Octane. So you have a specific Blender version they give you that you have to download from their website, which works with Octane, but you have to export files from Blender.
Yes.
Yeah, then you have
Separate.
to, yes, you have to export them. Then you have to go and upload them somewhere. You have to package them, and it's extremely convoluted. It really isn't. It isn't simple. Look, time is money even for artists. Time is money. So if you have a rendering platform, what is the purpose of it? Well, the purpose of it is to render faster. I want to save time. If you're adding another process that's making it more complicated in the start, first of all, imagine put yourself in the artist's shoes and him saying, oh, do I feel in a mood right now to do that? I'll get to it later. Or
there's many extra steps in comparison. You got to get the license. Exactly. You got to pay with the credit card. You got to export all the files over.
Right. And you're obviously paying for that license, but on top of that, you're paying, if you want to render, then you're paying for the render as well. So you've got kind of three, those complicated to use, paying subscription to Autoy, it's the only way you can actually get a gateway to use the rendering platform plus pay for the rendering.
So that brings me to the VPN, which is not a subscription, and that's why a lot of people are using it. An impressive, this was 3 months ago, over 1,700 downloads, over 19,000 sessions, and 12.7 terabytes of data. Has the VPN usage increased since then? I know
Yes.
There's a lot of action. And what are today's numbers at?
Yeah, well, I glanced before. And let me just have a look. I know downloads at least.
And the VPN's available on Android and Apple, so it's a real
just on Android. Just on Android, 22,200 downloads of the app on Google Play Store. That doesn't include downloads from for iOS. Doesn't include browser extension downloads. So I don't know. I haven't got the numbers for those off by hand, but
the growth is
the total
good.
VPN sessions up to date is is it from what I'm seeing? Hold on one second. My screen is small, so apologies. 32,405. This was
that's a 70% increase in 1 quarter. So that's awesome. And the VPN boasts the same type of ethos that the rendering platform has. Right. It's easy to use. Data is not collected. You pay in the native Octa coin. Can you go over some of the features of the VPN?
Great stuff. We support multiple different protocols. We obviously we're available on multiple devices. User provided nodes act as exit nodes. So you're effectively, it's kind of like imagine you've got a list of nodes from different countries and you say, okay, I'm gonna, it basically becomes a tunnel. So you know how VPNs work. Your data starts at one end, it exits the other, and it's coming in from the other end. So you're now looking at, I'm browsing from the UK, I'm browsing from Hong Kong, whatever you choose. The costs are so small. One of the best selling points is it's pay as you go, so no subscription, and it's really cheap. But one thing that we've done that many have struggled with, no one's tackled the issue of China, Iran, some of the more difficult countries. Our biggest user base is Chinese people, and that's something interesting because
that makes sense.
Because China, a lot of VPNs don't work in China. Many, and many don't even attempt to try and address the issue because it's quite a difficult issue to address. One of the key benefits of our infrastructure and the way we've done it, and why user nodes is it's a lot more difficult to shut down. But it's also we've bypassed some of the let's call it the Great Firewall of China, as it's called, through ways and means, technological solutions, obviously nothing immoral. We believe in that freedom. I think it sticks to the ethos we talked about of freedom. Freedom of expression, freedom to information. I really have an issue with government control in general. I'm sure many of us read some of Orson Welles, and the way it could go down. But it's one of it's a great asset. Obviously, one of the issues the way the marketing, for example, is working for Chinese is word of mouth. Obviously, it's a very sensitive subject, because publicly they're not allowed to even use VPNs. But we have obviously great uptake of that VPN services, and people are loving the fact that you can disconnect and connect whenever you want. We also our VPN can be configured on router level. So we enable them to download configuration files, so you can configure the VPN session and set up on your router level, so your whole house and every single device and your browsing is going through that VPN session.
That's neat. That's really cool.
So a lot of that freedom and that flexibility. I think we've been deliberating whether to build our own desktop app. I mean, the iOS app, for example, works on Mac as well, Mac PCs. But you can load ours into OpenVPN or into WireGuard. Just load the config file and it works as a desktop app. So we didn't see the necessity to. What we can do, the mobile VPN app, we wanted to make our own VPN app just to make it a lot easier to use. Again, going back to just simplicity aspects. But yeah, VPN is a great tool. And as I said, it's so cheap, but it's all about volume. It's not about the more people you get and the cheaper it is. It's about getting that traffic, and that's where the earnings are. It's that volume.
Absolutely.
So,
what can you tell me about the new marketplace and fiat on ramp? From my understanding, you're taking VPN rendering, you're putting everything on one easy to use platform on a website, and there's going to be a fiat on ramp, so people could potentially pay with a credit card to get Octa to pay for services. So
in a way, yes. Yeah. So right now we have a marketplace, but that marketplace was originally launched kind of, it was kind of the framework at the time, and said, okay, this will do. Let's build everything else around it. And obviously we've outgrown how the current marketplace looks. Aesthetically, it's not as pleasing as I'd like it to be, as an example. But aesthetics is not the only component of it. It's also the flexibility of we've built all these services around, as you said, rendering. And I want a lot more of a simpler user journey, and that also a lot more flexibility for node providers of how granular we can get. So right now, I mentioned to you an example of, users are when providing a node, you set your own costs. What I want to do is, for example, some of the algorithms will be set a recommended cost. Basically, it will do certain calculations and say, okay, based on your score, we recommend this price. Usually rentals go for this price. So you could choose to maybe, rent at that place. So introducing some of those additional, more interesting features, I think that will be useful for both node providers and users who are renting services. But yes, on-ramp. Now, this is one area, again, that we're exploring, and we're trying and one key aspect is we're trying to obviously look at a third-party supplier who will integrate Octa, but not ask us to collect user information. And this is important. There are many on-ramps that insist on us collecting that, doing that KYC, and they don't want to do that.
Yes,
it's a fine line. So we've been opening discussions with many of them and looking at which one best suits our ethos and our approach. But I think it's important to note our services. Obviously, a lot of that is done based on payment of Octa. But right now, we need more traditional users to use it, and we are getting them, but they don't use exchanges. They haven't, I want the average Joe off the street who has,
it's a barrier of entry for
blockchain. I want him to view Octa as credits, as my kids play. The best way I could explain it is my kids play Roblox. I don't know if I'm sure and you buy in-game currency called Robux.
Yeah, this is real cryptocurrency. This is
right. And so let's say, you're buying Octa coins, let's call it Octa credits, for using for Octa rendering or for the VPN, and you top up using your card. That's kind of the idea behind it, I think. And that will hit, if you don't market necessarily the blockchain to them, and because many of them may not understand it. We're still, as I'm sure many of you seen the term called, we're early. Well, yes, we are early. We're still in our infancy. But I actually feel, and that Octaspace is one of those projects that can bridge that gap of people be willing to accept blockchain and
I agree.
cryptocurrency, because we are a project that are actually focused on users. It's not, our focus isn't just pleasing investors that many crypto projects do. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, and there are many other issues in crypto space, obviously. But I think I posted it yesterday on my Twitter, is how many projects have you seen that launch and in their white paper say, oh, here's our strategy for growth of how we're going to target users of our services.
You all have real world products. You all have real world products. This is what I like to think of you as. You have real world products that are top of their space and performance with the crypto framework.
Exactly. And there's the benefit of crypto.
Yes.
And I think end users will recognize that. Many end users, even those that are from traditional space, will recognize that and eventually go, oh, this is great. I don't have to give you my information. I think this is fantastic. It just give you that little small touch to it, and then understanding that, hey, actually, my entire session here is anonymous. I'm secure. I'm not, and I'm controlling what I spend, and this complete freedom of I can choose how long I want to rent, what I want to rent, how much I'm willing to spend, and I'm completely anonymous. This whole kind of fits in that ethos of what crypto is. And then you're putting them in that gateway of, hey, now you understand what cryptocurrency is about, what blockchain is about, why it's so valuable, and why it's the future.
Awesome. So we know you've laid out a lot of aspects of your roadmap, some including expanding Octarender to support Unreal Engine, as you mentioned, storage solution, application deployment, which I want to touch on, and then the bridge that just came out for swapping. Can you tell us more about some of these initiatives and in general how Octaspace manages to work on the roadmap?
So I think one of the important things is to understand is, so we often see many projects in crypto, they say this is a roadmap. Well, what is a roadmap, right? Is that in a classical sense, and I think many in crypto world, what they recognize is a project that plans to implement something. They are, and most of those roadmaps that we see have a start and an end. We don't. We are, something we focus on is constant innovation. We are about growth. We are here not, here today, gone tomorrow kind of thing. This is a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year, 30-year venture, right? This is something that we don't foresee an end. We see something that we can continue to grow into a beast, a monster, for the lack of a better term. And so what we do is what we call strategic planning. So every year we budget. We budget our budget. So it's define what our budget is for that annual, what we're looking to spend, where to invest. Then we'll look at, okay, a strategic roadmap forms a framework and say, okay, these are our guiding principles of what we're going to focus on, or initiatives we will focus on for this year, right? And so we can first, give ourselves generic headings. So let's say we start with rendering. Okay, all right. Well, what areas can we focus on? AI and so on and so on and so on. So each individual ones, and obviously I mentioned storage. You mentioned storage, application deployment, and so on. And so what we then do is, a lot of that is based on initial market analysis or market research, looking at opportunities. Again, a lot of our platform growth is focused on service uptake, because while I'm sure you've looked into our monetary policy, but there's a certain amount that goes into the dev fund, right? Of every block. But after that's ended, the dev fund will only be funded by a small fee from service transactions.
Sure.
Right? We aren't going to get any more blocks, or for the lack of a better term. So it's about ensuring that long-term success and ensuring that we continue to operate long-term. And that's that, focusing on that uptake of services. So going back to, just providing that context, going back to roadmap, why? So then we look at areas that, first of all, have tremendous potential for growth. has a high demand, and we can implement easy to use services that will have high uptake. And then breaking that down into a kind of strategic roadmap as a framework, and then we break up the year into program increments, into actually 5 program increments. And we actually do real planning of what we're going to really figure and focus on delivering in that program increment. The reason why we do that is because priorities can change throughout the year. There are many innovations that come out. I'm sure you've seen, we mentioned AI. Look at what difference has been made in just 1 year.
The pace is astounding.
The pace is astounding. Let's call it, what's what I'm looking for here, where you're framing yourself or fencing yourself into this small box of, this is what I'm going to focus on, without looking at what's going on externally, I think isn't a recipe for success. You need to adapt, and you need to innovate. You need to adapt. You need to be able to be aware of what's going on outside of your project, what innovations are happening, and where you can take, find an opportunity. I guess that's the best way I can answer. So, as I said, we break up the year into individual increments, and then we have bi-weekly sprints when we deliver each different features or aspects of features or parts of it in the individual.
So you have a macro focus, but you have kind of a micro hustle.
Right, exactly. So we say, okay, this is what we're going to focus on in this increment, and we planned it out, and this is what we committed to. All the other ones are, okay, during this time period in program increment, we'll investigate what's going on and what we can plan for the next increment. And that's based on market research and what's going on out there in the world and new innovations, and say, okay, hey, can we tackle this? And our guys do a little bit of R&D, and we do a proof of concept, so we play around with a lot of ideas, and we do have some proof of concept stuff for chat and so on, that we're looking to release already, hopefully soon. But yeah, so a lot of that's being developed. Storage solution, I mentioned to you earlier that the actual rendering architecture is the baseline for that, so it's actually a prerequisite of us or to use. But it's great. We're still, though, not fully set on the full solution. There are some options on the table, whether we might do it in a way that, I guess, concepts of how torrents work. But there are other options too. So they're playing around with that currently. What's the most, let's go decentralized, but also most robust, because the issue that we need to ensure, no data loss. You want to be able to place that file somewhere. But also that not anyone bar you has access to the whole file. And so what we're looking at is a couple of aspects of distributing that data, but having robust data stored elsewhere, so that you can never have a corrupted. Hey, I'm missing this data piece, so you've got corrupted data. So there are a lot of moving parts, figuratively speaking, to it. And so they're still tinkering with that, but it's something we're focused on delivering this year, and it's still in the roadmap. It's still being worked on, so hasn't fallen by the wayside. And we're also looking at some of the other AI tools. Application deployment is something that is focused on very much. It's actually very similar to what Flux do. You can deploy actual applications, so whether that's WordPress and so on. And that's something that Artem is very passionate about, and
he's the, what's his title, lead developer?
He's the technical director. He's the CTO.
Yeah.
So he and when it comes to really technical direction, I have to lean on him. I'm not I mentioned I was a developer many decades ago, but no longer, obviously. But so for when it comes to technical direction, he's the guy to go to. And he manages technical questions. I manage direction of developers in terms of how I want it to behave from a product and user-centric point of view, and looking at what individual aspects are being delivered in sprints and whether we're on time or not. So that's a lot more my kind of forte. But together we make a great team, right? We drive that direction of the project, and that's So
Proof is in the pudding. So
Exactly.
talk about application deployment. If someone wants to come in and develop an application on the network because of the speeds, the economics, etc.,
Mhm.
how would that work? If someone has an idea,
I
they
think
could deploy an application, or on the flip side of that, they can deploy something on the native
yeah.
blockchain.
The
Yeah.
idea here will be that you'll be able to deploy an application, and you'll be able to run it all based off the decentralized nodes, effectively. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. It's you could run a website for the sake of argument. I mean, it could be
Yeah.
anything that you want. You could run a CDN for the sake of argument. You could use that infrastructure to run whatever your heart desires effectively. I think that flexibility is important. It's also making our platform even more diverse. It's not just individual services, but you can launch your own applications how you want. But this is hosting your own applications. It's not us telling you, we'll just facilitate you doing that. We won't, it's you deploy it and host it however long you want. I mean, an easy thing you could do, you can already do it, is you could run a game server, let's say a Minecraft
Yep.
server if you wanted to.
Yep.
So that's something you could already do. And so that all these are all individual applications that you can run. And I think it's important that leveraging that infrastructure, there shouldn't be limiting ourselves to individual segments. And this is the compute part. And I think that kind of brings me along to how I foresee our growth and where positioning ourselves, and how I want to target individual market segments. And I know I mentioned it at the kind of start of our conversation, but
All
I
right,
don't know.
we're gonna get there. That's gonna be the last
Okay.
question.
Okay.
As of right now, the last thing that was developed was the bridge, which when I
Yeah.
joined the ecosystem, everyone and their mother was screaming from the rooftops that we need a bridge so that they
Yes.
can swap their Ethereum or USDT for
Yeah.
Octa, and that was completed pretty quickly,
That was
and
done.
done a week ago.
Actually, I don't know how long you've been following the project, but actually, it was. So we originally mentioned the bridge was something that was requested long ago,
Mm-hmm.
and we at the time started working on it. And the I actually decided to put a stop on it temporarily, because my issue was that some of our development efforts, were being focused on that, and instead of using the opportunity to using some of the computing aspects. And I
Yep.
also think we were not as big at the time, so there was
Yeah.
no need for it at that point in time. I think
Right.
it was, it might sound harsh, but it was a waste of funds, right? I mean, look, I look at it's very pragmatically everything is what is the scope of work, how much are we going to invest, so what is our capital expenditure, what is our, do we have an operating expenditure to each, because for everything we have to have an operating expenditure, but what is our initial capex and what is the return on investment. And
Sure.
the bridge isn't a return on investment effectively, it's just a gateway for Octa to be traded on dexes, because you have to
Yep.
you bridge that to have wrapped Octa token on another chain.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not earning revenue from that, right? This is really something that more so is benefiting investors. And while I'm not, please don't take this the wrong way, I'm not negating the necessity and importance of investors. They aren't the primary driver that's going to make us money and ensure the whole success of our platform and services. The end users are. And so I felt it was important that we have, first of all, a lot more what we have now. Obviously, Octarender was something that we're passionate about, expanding the VPN at the time, expanding the compute services at the time. I think, the way I looked at it was, look, once we have a lot more of those things in place, Octa by itself is more marketable, right? I think that's what matters. And I didn't want that goal to suffer by shifting our immediate focus on having the bridge. So the bridge was developed to a certain degree, and I also had concerns at that time of how robust that bridge could be, because we've seen many times bridge hacks. that
Mhm.
have happened,
Yeah,
which have caused extreme issues
large
with people.
exploits. Yeah.
Right. And that was something I was extremely hesitant about. It's it was a concern. So I said, let's hold off on that. We're not significantly big enough. Let's focus on the primary goal or outcomes. What is our bread and butter? And that's computing services and so on. And then so now, going back to, there was a lot more demand as we're growing. There's a lot more people coming in and saying, hey, is Octa available on a decentralized exchange or DEX? And my often comment was no. So I said, okay, I think it's time to circle back and let's get the bridge in place. And so, that shift was made, and we do have blockchain developers, obviously, and we said, okay, let's do that, let's build that, and that was built, and it's been robustly tested. I did a lot of looking back of, hey, can we investigate, what all the previous hacks were from other projects, and see if
Yeah.
we can actually hack our own in the same way. And last thing I want to do is, history repeating, right, of some other
Yeah.
project exploit happening to our same bridge. So I'm
Hmm.
relatively confident, 99% confident that there's always obviously something that could happen that, there's a famous saying, in the UK they call it Sod's Law. I think you call it Murphy's Law in the US, right? Anything that can go wrong will go wrong, kind of thing. So,
It's a good
there's
way
no
to approach it.
guarantees that anything that you might not break something, but I'm 99.999% confident that it's
Awesome.
going to be right. Yeah.
On that note, let's talk about the growth of developers. Started with you and Artem, and it seems like there's up to 8, 10 developers now.
Yeah, there's 10 guys right now. There's 10 separate guys aside from me and Artem. And Artem is both the developer and a CTO. So, but he's a primary spearheading that. We
Hmm.
have 10 other guys. 4 are actually still working on Octarender. So they are core. We've split them up basically. The way we've done it is we've split them up into streams. Um, and I think this is, me, but harking back to some of my agile approach and how I see individual strategy, and what I mentioned about how a strategic roadmap, where we have an increment and we then define the individual work streams. And so we have guys, 4 right now on Octarender. I know that one of them is working on expanding the VPN multi-hop. There are 2 guys working on the marketplace, the new marketplace right now. One of them
Hmm.
is working on the node provider side of things. The other one is working on the actual user end of it. We do have a designer who's working with them, but let's not count him in. So we have a mobile app developer right now. He worked on the VPN app
Hmm.
for Android. And he is now working on a new Telegram bot, I believe, Android, and he wants to do. I think it's a kind of a what is it called? I'm trying to remember what it's called now, where we give out kind of like we can give out coins or as rewards, flooding, random
On
users.
Telegram.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
Telegram, because we have that Discord flood bot on
Yeah, it's
Discord.
more efficient. Yeah.
Yeah. But I also want apps to be deployed. Something I want, and this is just my concept, is another unique selling point. I want an Octarender app. So our Octarender is also accessible on mobile.
Yeah.
Actually, many rendering platforms aren't. But I actually want
Hmm.
a dedicated app. Why is that? What I want is kind of like I want users to be able to submit a render and go off for a walk or whatever, go for coffee, and then they'll get like a notification, 5 minutes before the render will load back.
That's so cool. That's great
Yeah.
marketing too
Yeah, so
for the platform.
I've submitted a render. Oh, great! I'll get a notification 10 or 15 minutes, so they can set a notification. Say I'll set it 30 minutes before it ends or before it finishes, so I know when to go back home to download it. And I think that
That's next level.
yeah, so that I mean, obviously, I'm sharing stuff that's this is something I'm passionate about. I think it's something that I've never seen anyone do, and I think it's a great opportunity of something that's another selling point. I always look at what's the selling point. It's and that is a return investment because it's another selling point of upsell your platform, and one of our best best I guess marketing is our users. I've added, we've added testimonials to the website. I don't know if you've seen, but and we intentionally did that because it sets us apart from many crypto projects of, well, hey, look, they actually have users. People are actually using them, right? This
Well,
isn't just
yeah. And
this.
what I like about you all is you're very project oriented. You're not spending marketing dollars on, hey, buy my coin, look into my project.
Yeah.
It's the marketing dollars go towards acquiring Blender users.
So can I? It looks like my camera's off, or frozen.
That's all right. Just keep
Uh,
talking.
1 second. Well, let me. I can make it work if you want to give me a second.
Yeah, no problem. We'll go back to the platform here and look around.
Okay, I'm back.
This one's cool.
Yeah, there's some really cool ones. Hey, if you want to, if you go to Carson Reed's Twitter profile, actually, let me send it to you. He actually posted the video of that render that you saw. Let me send it to you, Carson. Yeah, I'll send it to you on this chat here, where you can see the completed render that was
Yeah.
done.
Send it on Zoom.
Yeah, I'll send it here, so you can actually see. There you go. So that render you saw with the frames, you can actually see the full kind of completed work. Yeah, that's it. If you open, you can make it bigger. But that looks pretty good. I love the reflection on those balls and things like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh wow, I didn't even notice that.
This is done by motion capture. So what they
Really?
actually do is, yeah. So he's done. So I don't know if you saw, but we Bungie and Rococo, I think they're called.
Hmm.
They kit them out with motion capture kit, and they actually do all this. So this is all him testing out motion capture, and then rendering that all on Octarender. And actually, so it is a bit of an insight. They're currently working on a full feature kind of film for Destiny 2. That's going to be all rendered on Octarender. So it's really, really great.
Imagine 10 years from now where it can all happen all at once. Motion
This is
capture and then it's immediately rendered.
Yeah.
It's just cool.
So one of the things I actually asked, I reached out to some of the artists because one thing I'd want to do is, I mean, I don't want to share this yet to the broader audience, but I want to get into some of the augmented reality stuff too. As and using one of the things I also looked at was leveraging AI to generate models, ready-made models to be used inside Render or Blender, so that you can then integrate into your artwork if you wanted to. Right? There are I don't know if you know, but you can purchase models right now. So you can purchase a model of, let's say, a sword or a gun. Someone's modeled a gun, and then you can integrate it into your own models and so on. What I want to do is create a marketplace. I want to explore this idea of digital assets and using Octa to pay for those digital assets, not NFTs. You're paying for models to download to use models, right? I don't know if you've ever seen. Give you an example of a Blender. It's called BlenderKit.com. I don't know if you've seen it, but
you can share your screen if you need to.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, let me share my screen. Share screen. And, so if you go to models, Blender Kit, you can hear, I mean, this is a subscription-based service, but you can basically, download a door, right? get
So
as
this is
many.
something that could be built on
So
Octa.
this is something I want to do as
Yeah.
part of Octarender. What I want to do
Hmm.
is offer artists the opportunity, and
Commission, could the artist get a commission on their
artists
work in
could
Octa?
exactly. They
Nice.
could also then get paid in Octa and use that Octa to pay for their renders as well.
That's so cool. So cool.
So this is just, as I said, I do a lot of market research. I know what's out there. I know
Hmm.
but I'm also seeing opportunities. Look, this isn't hard to implement, creating a marketplace. It's almost like an NFT one, but this won't be NFTs. You'll be able to download actual Blender
Yep.
models.
Yep.
Um,
Awesome.
but for this to be in place, I want our decentralized storage solution to be in place as well. And so that we'll actually be able to leverage it so we
Yeah.
can store the models there.
No worry of data loss. So a lot of people, they just assume, it's funny in crypto, everyone just assumes that project is a token, and I see it in the
Yeah,
Telegram. What's the contract address? So Okta is actually its own proof of work layer one, which is what
right.
originally
Okay.
attracted me to the project. I won't
Yeah,
touch anything unless it's its own layer one,
yeah.
and fairly launched. How is the blockchain ecosystem growth coming along? Because that's a whole separate part of
Oh,
growth.
it
And
is.
what advantages does Okta have being a layer one versus an ERC20 token?
Well, I mean, I touched upon it obviously earlier on, is that, the only way you can ensure your fair launch project is if you're a blockchain, honestly, and
Exactly.
really
Yeah.
generally. Regardless of what they say, but tokens are rarely fair launched. It's very difficult to really do because you are controlling tokens. Here,
Mm-hmm.
it's, blocks. We've said this is the monetary policy, how it will happen, and a reduction of block sizes and so on. And so in that, it kind of fits into that ethos of fairly launched. But what that does mean, there is a differentiator. Projects that
Why
are
was
fairly
that?
launched,
Why was that important for you guys when starting the project?
I think it's a lot more to do with our mentality and ethics, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think you can pretty much tell. I genuinely have a distaste. Let's call it, detest is probably the wrong word. Distaste to how many projects are launched, how they the way that allocations happen, the
Mm-hmm.
involvement of VCs.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, all this is often very questionable.
Capitalists. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's not so much about capitalism; it's just a money grab. It really is a money grab,
It
and
no,
I
it
feel
is, and
it.
it's
I
not the
feel
original ethos of crypto.
right. This is
It's
it.
not Bitcoin. It's not Bitcoin like. Yeah.
It does not resonate to what the original concept of what crypto was about, and that
Yeah.
is, decentralization and actually innovation, bringing something new. If, whoever Satoshi was, I don't think he was intending to watch Meme tokens launch and a bunch of guys launching these and scamming people or doing whatever they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that was the original idea. or and I think there are many great projects out there that actually do adhere to this ethos. Casper's one of them. I don't mind mentioning that. I don't mind mentioning those that I value for their ethics and their approach.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, there's nothing wrong with that. So I think it's remaining within that ethos of what crypto is, but also having the ethics of look, as I said, while the benefits are there, the negatives are we're not as rich. That's
Yeah,
it's a simple fact.
you've had this amazing product. You could have raised VC money, launched a token, it would have been easier, but you all
Right.
chose
We
to
chose the
focus
hard
on.
way. We've
You
chose
chose
the
the
more
hard way,
harder path, and I think
but the right way, and it'll pay off more over time. And
right.
I think we're seeing that happen.
People don't realize how difficult this path is, and they don't realize that this success that we've built up to now has been fully organic. This we haven't paid in shillers, calls, and ultimately because one, because of our ethics code, two, because we have a finite amount of funds we can spend. We as I said, when you're a token, you allocate yourself a massive chunk, 30%, fire, whatever, plus you get taxes from trading on DEX and so on and so on. So they rake it in, frankly. I apologize for using that term, but it really is what's happening.
Yes, yeah.
It's a sheer money grab with really no kind of principle behind it. And I think that that doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't resonate with what the ethos of blockchain and crypto was about. But I think, as I said to you earlier, and I truly believe that, it's not a pie in the sky. I want Octa to be, first of all, a recognized brand, both in crypto and in traditional markets. And that's, something what I've been very passionate about, and why we've been doing what we have been doing, and bridging that gap between the mainstream and getting that adoption. I think it's important that we be at the forefront. And many of us, there are projects that will be that, and will be written in history. And I genuinely feel that Octa is one of those projects. So obviously, you can tell I'm ambitious. So but it's good to have ambition and vision. But as I said, it's a difficult path, and we have to budget carefully. We have to look at where to invest, how to invest. It's about smart investing and long-term growth. It's about being able to say, I will be here in 20 years, and not I'm here today, gone tomorrow.
Okay, so now that we're on the subject of layer one blockchain, Octa does have a pretty rapid emission schedule, which is a good thing. And it's a good thing because it gets the coins in the hands of the original raving fans, users of the platform.
Right.
And there's great network effects of word to mouth marketing. No whales being able to come in early and grab a big chunk of the supply. Really, really well thought out. And there's some other projects that I'm a fan of that have a more rapid emission schedule. Due to that, in a few years, the emissions are going to run out. And it's a cool experiment because Octa is going to have to survive off of having a user base. So it's almost like you have a deadline. You have to have enough users. Bingo. And you're well on your way there. And I think by that point in time, there's going to be millions of users, and there's going to be a lot of transaction fees. Okay. So tell me a little bit about how that security budget's going to be maintained, and how node rewards and what the economics of the marketplace look like after rewards are finished.
Well, it will be all mainly driven by fees. So I mentioned to you earlier is everything is about volume. I think everything we've done, and as you said something really that's important, and I think many people don't realize, we have a deadline. That is really it's a great point that many have failed to realize. We have a deadline to get things done, to certain things in place. It's not, we can't be sat twiddling our thumbs. And we work very hard, and we are very organized, and that's why things are moving at a very rapid pace. And we need to ensure that we have everything in place sufficiently to survive. So therefore, we're focusing on growth. We're focusing on what we're releasing, but being able to continue growth while we're releasing. And, a lot of that is, even our emissions is aggressive. Our roadmaps are aggressive. What we want to achieve is aggressive. And doing things in a smart way and budgeting the right way. That's why, when we get I get a lot of people going, hey, can we get onto a next exchange? Sure. Exchange is something we can consider, but I also have to consider the costs or the cost implications. It's easy for a user, an investor doesn't care what it costs of the project. We have to care. We have to bear in mind, look, I can list on an exchange tomorrow and pay them 200K, but how much development does 200K give me? Just, think about that. And I think we need to continue generating fees. And I think that's important, is that continues to grow, then we are in a much more comfortable position.
Yep, and to sustain nodes and miners.
Exactly. Everyone says, and so once we reach that max supply, the only source of revenue will be for services. And I think that's, but also, and while I don't in principle focus on the market value of Octa as in its own.
Well, when there's no more circulating supply,
more rare it'll be a
Yeah.
lot more rare. So you know, you're going to be getting very minute fractions of Octa for what it is, and that will ultimately impact the value of Octa, right?
Correct. Yep.
You know, we're talking about. I mean, a
Which
good
also
example
goes in
is
line with the
Ethereum, right?
fees.
Is where one ETH now is whatever it is, $3,000,
Yeah.
$4,000. You know, and so now you're dealing in fractions of ETH. And that's the way I probably most likely see Octa at the end of the max supply, where you know
for some people it's hard to foresee that future, but that's just how things play out with good
that's how
technology.
things will happen. That is the ultimate, you know, that's how it's going to end up. So people now dealing with, you know, hundreds of Octa or thousands of Octa, I think it's difficult to see that right this minute, but that is how it's going to be in the end. And that's, you know, and it's very, very aggressive. 2027 isn't a long way. So
yeah, well, you already have the platforms, you already have the growing user base, so it's all happening.
Yeah.
Wrapping things up, this has been, I think, an excellent interview. Two-part question. You've touched on some of this already. First part, what is your overall strategy for growth and adoption of your current products? Yeah. We know there's been many artists using the rendering platform as well as the VPN service. What are your continued plans? Following up to that, what's your grand vision for the platform, for Octaspace, and what does the maturity phase of Octaspace look like?
Yeah. So this is, I mean, I guess, yeah, you're right. We touched upon some of those aspects. So what I want to do right now, currently Octaspace is being distributed or is shown as one platform. What I want to do is, there's a specific reasons why we've given names such as Octarender or Octa AI. I don't know if you've seen some of the terms thrown around, but what I want to do is have each one of those as individual brands. And then Octaspace is the kind of overarching brand that's managing all those. So, you know, we've put together some documentation and we Medium articles where I've kind of shared some of that vision. But what I want is different websites for all those where we brochureware websites where it's actually selling individual one of those services. And what that's going to do is, you know, focusing on SEO, focusing on various, it's all about driving on hitting individual segments. We can do marketing easier for also those individual segments. I think, you know, while Octaspace as a platform can have that amalgamation of all those services and say, okay, this is the overarching company or business, you know, and a block project. But all these are sub brands of Octaspace. I think that will be easier to market and sell and hit individual market segments, because then I can then distribute and say I can get a marketing guy for each one of those, and they can work on growth on those individual areas. So that's an example of, I think it's more of a strategy that we can talk, you know.
Well, it's the theme. It's the theme of compartmentalization, just like how you organize the development.
Exactly. And I think, you know, Octa Compute is one, Octa AI, Octa Storage, Octarender, and so on and so on. And so each one of those, and I think it's a great way of doing it, because, you know, and obviously they scroll down and go check out our other products. So they'll do, but, you know, they can hit individual ones based on a search engine optimization, because the issue you're going to have is a lot of users, even now, if you're going to a specific platform, you're looking for something. Right. And if you hit with a lot of information, it can potentially be off-putting. Look, one of the reasons why we've also been successful, for example, for bringing a lot of artists on board, has actually been mainly due to we have a couple of guys who are working on direct outreach. What that means is they actually physically contact artists. They're going around identifying artists from forums, from Twitter, from Reddit, from all over the place, and DMing them and saying, okay, I mean, you could compare it to cold sales or cold calling. And I don't mind. Yeah, but it's sales. It is sales. They are doing sales. But, you know, and I think that direct outreach is still a great tool. There's ways to do it. You know, the internet's a great place. It's a very rich place. There's lots of talent out there. So, you know, you've got that field, why not use it? And so, you know, their primary goals are, hey, go reach out to these guys. And they put together a list, hey, how many have you contacted? How many have you contacted? And then, you know, and they do a great job, and they have been fantastic in getting those artists. So it's some of that is traditional approach, but I don't see anything wrong with it. I think every time an artist has tried it out, they fall in love, and that's I think one of the guys called yesterday said, "You're like a drug dealer." I said, "Well, yeah, I my goal was get the artists addicted to the platform, and once
Hmm.
they're hooked, it's like anything, right? You get guys addicted, or people addicted to TikTok, and it's all about how addictive a platform is. It does matter. It plays a
Well,
crucial role.
it's so great for marketing purposes. Just as a member of the community, being able to see what people are rendering,
Mhm.
to see that every day, either on the platform or on Twitter, and
Yeah.
hearing artists' reviews or VPNs users' reviews, shouting their praise. It's very encouraging, and
Mhm.
it kind of sets the stage for what's to come in terms of rapid adoption of users. So, Tarik, I appreciate the interview. The
No, thank you.
community appreciates you guys, all the developers, all your hard work, and we're here for the ride.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a smooth one, I'm sure.
Awesome, thank you. I'm
Thank you.
gonna